Let's go.
You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Welcome back to Making Data Simple. Al Martin here. Today I'm with Sam Torres, who is the Chief Digital Officer and co-founder of the Gray Company. And this is a consulting firm that specializes in SEO, which is search engine optimization, and data analysis for regulated industries, nonprofit organizations, and SaaS. She has been in the field for more than a decade and is a sought-after subject matter expert in complex digital analytics and consumer insights data. She also has a knack for using digital data to provide insights into complex business inquiries and addressing technical issues for marketing. She's got an excellent blend of creativity and technical skills. She's making her services end-to-end from ideation to integration. Thank you for being here, Sam. Did I miss anything?
No, not too much. Just, I'm Sam. I'm based in Atlanta. Our company, Gray Company, we just have a lot of fun. So we deal with SEO. So how do you rank higher on Google naturally? And then also what's all the data that you can take from that to really start to educate other parts of your business.
So I'm a data guy, I'm an AI guy, but I'm not necessarily a marketing guy. So you're going to teach me today. So I apologize in advance for any silly questions.
All good. Also, you'll have to catch me because in marketing, we love our 3-letter acronyms, our TLAs. So If I say any, feel free to stop me because, we have a ton and man, we really like them. It's problematic, really.
You can't beat IBM on that. IBM has more acronyms, 3-letter acronyms than anybody else in the world. So you're sitting in like a gamer's chair. Are you a gamer?
I am, yes. So I'm actually mostly a console gamer, but I do play PC games as well. Actually, I just came back from a gaming convention this weekend where I played a bunch of pinball and old school arcade machines.
Well, that's not the gaming that I thought we were going to get into.
I do all kinds.
Wow.
Really.
You do all sides. Did you win?
So just to show how nerdy I am, I don't have a dining room. I have a gaming room because I have a custom tabletop and board game table made because my husband and I play Warhammer. So we get those little tiny figures. We spend hours putting them together and painting them. And then we simulate battle. Other nerds think we're nerdy.
That's a good threshold. You know, you're doing something right. Other nerds call you a nerd. That's fantastic.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, but we have lots of fun. My son really enjoys it too. So we're just, we're just continuing on the tradition.
You'd have been good for Dungeons and Dragons back in the day.
Oh yeah. So I've actually had to choose whether I was going to invest my time in D&D or Warhammer, and Warhammer won out.
What is Warhammer? See, this is how nerdy I am.
Yeah.
So
that's the little figures that basically you have you just have all these models and units that are made up. And like I said, you simulate battle and they have rules and you roll a bunch of dice to see if your hits actually go through. And it's very nerdy.
Wow. So it's like Dungeons and Dragons, but with live figurines.
Correct.
Awesome. You're kind of sitting in the dark too. Is that all right?
So I do have my lights on, but I do like any true gamer. I'm adverse to sunlight.
You're gonna have to come out of the lair at some point. That's awesome. So give me a little bit about yourself. I know I gave the lead in, but I always like to allow you to introduce yourself. Go back a little bit, give your experience and what brings you to today.
Sure. So my first career was being a front-end developer. At the time, we just were called web designers. But I come from a code perspective and then really fell in love with marketing. So I ended up kind of in this intersection of marketing and tech. So that's kind of where I ended up with search engine optimization. And then, I've been fortunate that I've been agency side for most of my career and then founded the Gray Company with Tori Gray. And we just have a lot of fun. We get to tackle some really complex problems. Usually it's complicated tech stacks, anything regarding hey, Google's not able to crawl my site. Why? So those are the types of issues that we tackle pretty often. And then just about me, like I said, I used to be a front-end engineer, so I love to code. I love the data piece of it and data science. And then one of the things that's really fun is when you're able to use some of the information that we'll gather for marketing campaigns and start influencing other parts of your business. So for example, a lot of things that we do pretty common is actually look at keyword research. So what are people actually looking for online? and how should that impact your product roadmap and what features you invest in and develop. So that's a little bit
That's
about what I usually do, what my day-to-day looks like.
what made the pivot between you. It sounds like you were a developer. It sounds like you're still a developer. Is that true?
Yes, I still do some coding as well.
What are you usually coding in?
So with front end, I'm usually doing in React. So just JavaScript.
Okay, fair enough. So what made the pivot to, hey, I got to get into marketing?
So actually, it was while I was in college. I was also working full-time in retail, and I really wanted to, basically I was working in a store and I couldn't understand why, like, basically the end caps and what we would promote. Why did we pick those? So I actually, so that started me wanting to study marketing and be the person who decides. So I actually thought I was going to go into branding, and then realized I still need to be more technical. Not to say that branding people aren't technical, because some of them are extremely that way. But yeah, so just kind of ended up finding this mix between the two, and love it.
So is it all about Google, or is, what are the other platforms that you quote unquote market from? I mean,
Great question.
when you first think is Google, and it's like, but I got to believe there's more than Google.
There is more than Google. For a while though, they definitely had a monopoly on it. So I'd say for US and really any of your English speaking countries or markets, Google's still very much king. Bing has started to come up, so they're providing some interesting competition finally. And then for other segments of the world, you may have to think about Yandex or Baidu, but those are going to be for non-English speaking markets. So usually we run into those a little bit less. My agency does, just because most of us speak English. So yeah.
Is this all about search engines, or is it? I mean, like, you could make a case that YouTube has search.
Absolutely. The other search engines that are important, YouTube, TikTok is actually a really big one, especially for any kind of like e-commerce or product sales. Reddit even has a bit. Then Amazon as well is a huge source. Because think about, when you go shopping, do we really Google it anymore, or do we just go straight to Amazon? And for most US audiences, you just go straight to Amazon. So eBay, Etsy, those are all platforms where this starts to matter.
But would you say like 80, 90% is Google then? 95%?
It's probably less than 80% these days.
Less than 80%. I'm with you. I usually go to Amazon, unless a lot of times I like to figure out like what is the top rated, whatever I'm looking for. Then I'll go back to Google, get the top rated, and then ultimately it sends me right back to Amazon. It seems like everything's funneling through Amazon, but it is what it is. They've done well from that perspective. All right, so here's my first big question, and this is from the novice marketer. What is DCI, or digital consumer intelligence, and how do you measure success?
Great questions. So digital consumer insights, that's really where we take, like I was talking about before, the marketing research and applying it to other parts of your business. So, one of my favorite things to do is actually crawl Reddit and start doing sentiment analysis about your products, your services, whatever it might be for clients, to really start to pull out where should you be investing. Also helping quantify what is the available market for a particular idea or product, whether that's geographical, based on language, based on demographics, interests. All of that data is really available if you just look at things like keyword data, or you start farming sentiment and engagement on YouTube, TikTok, looking for patterns of language on Reddit or LinkedIn. So all of these data sets are publicly available for you to just kind of tap into. So that's what we call the digital consumer intelligence. When you pair it with your own first party data, so that could be, your own website usage, how are clients using your SaaS product, all of that comes together to give you a better idea of the market. But it's really just applying what we typically do in SEO. We do all of that research all the time to really figure out what are the keywords to bring in the right users. But there's actually a lot more implications and a lot more uses for it outside of just that marketing channel.
How do you use Reddit for that? You're going to have to tell me a little bit more in that sentiment analysis. Like, my daughter just went viral, well, not just, but like a year ago, because she had her cat that jumped in the fridge. I don't know what you're going to gather from some of the stuff I see on Reddit. And then you talked about LinkedIn as well. That's very different. I mean, it's a whole different venue. So how do you gather the sentiment and then extrapolate that to be applicable to, some business environment?
Sure. So with Reddit, yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be plenty of subreddits that aren't going to have any uses, but let's say I'm creating content. I'm a company that creates content for parents. And so I can look at all those other subreddits and actually use site crawlers. And then with my background of being a developer, I'm able to create scripts for crawling it, gather all of that information in that text, and then use machine learning to start identifying what are the major topics. And like I say, run sentiment analysis, do all that fun machine learning stuff, I guess is what I'm going to call it right now. With LinkedIn, it's the same thing. You can crawl. LinkedIn is for that one, we often use it to kind of do market size comparison analysis. So for example, if a client comes to me and says, hey, we want to grow in this market, and here's 3 competitors that are doing it already, I'm going to start looking at, okay, well, cool, but your competitors have, 40, 50, and this one has 120 salespeople. You have 2. We need to talk about, do you even have the infrastructure to support that kind of growth? So it's just a lot of free data that's out there, and you can write scripts to have it be crawled.
When you say writing scripts, is it AI algorithms? Is it machine learning?
So a lot of times I just tap into APIs. So you can use JavaScript or Python to go ahead and get those. My husband is also a full stack engineer, so sometimes I get to cheat and have him help me write some. So like he's written some scripts for me in Golang so that I can tap into APIs and access all that data. And then I'll run them through machine learning models afterwards with the data set.
In between him playing the Dragons. Warhammer.
Yes, Warhammer. Yeah.
By the way, that chair looks very comfortable. I'm looking at the chair now and I'm thinking, I would like to have that chair. Are they comfortable?
They are. They're pricey, but they're still not as pricey as like the Herman Miller, like King of Office chairs. But yeah, DX Racer all day. I bought one for my husband as well. It just provides more support. Plus, they're usually really configurable because obviously gamers, we might spend a lot of time here. And so we very often. So.
I got the DCI. All right. So you've explained that well. I know there's different elements of it. You got to gauge interest. You discover trends on down the list. You're doing sentiment analysis. Got that. You're doing that through script. How do you know when you're successful? And I think I would give you this question with a frame of reference to the developer. You say you're a developer. Those developers, what they think sometimes of marketing, they think is voodoo behind the scenes, right? So you've done both sides. So tell me how to bridge those sides.
So for the developer, yeah, they're really just, all right, the dev side of me is, were you able to gather the data? Yes. For the marketing side or the business side, I will say for most of these projects, we have a question in mind. Now, sometimes it's a very clear question. Other times they're wanting to be able to wrap their arms around, really just blue ocean of opportunity. So what success looks like is when we're able to really make a recommendation. So, if it's a really pointed question, so I've had one where it's like, should we invest in this product? Is there a market for it? That usually comes to be a pretty clear, hey, there is, here's the volume that you can expect. If your investment is going to be 10x that, then obviously don't do it. On the flip side, when it's open ocean, it's really more about, do we now have a direction that we want to go in? So we do start working more with business strategists and advisors and analysts as opposed to developers, because then it gets a little too wishy-washy for the dev in me. But thankfully, the market.
Well, that's kind of, so I get the fundamentals. If people are asking, hey, is there a market? That's a completely different deal in terms of what I was thinking. By the way, how much do you spend on those fundamental questions versus established business?
Maybe about 30% of the time. It usually is established business, and they're asking either new applications for things they already have, or like I say, we spend a lot of time informing product roadmaps.
But if you look at it and taking the developer point of view, because I've been one of those as well, you have marketing come in and say, look, we have 2,000 areas of like interest. The suspicious eye from the developer is like, you guys are just trying to meet a scorecard here. You got 2,000, try to claim success. How many ultimate wins do you have? And then it's like, well, there's more of a process. You got to track leading and lag measures. We're not there yet. I mean, I'm still, how do you bridge that gap and how do you define success along the way beyond a shadow of a doubt? Or we just got to forget about the developer. We can't convince them anyway.
No, we don't have to forget about them because a lot of times explaining through that process, we'll find the leading metrics. So this happens fairly often just in SEO that people want to know, is it working? And SEO is a long-term play, right? The only thing I can do to drastically change SEO immediately is bad. So you don't want that. So finding those leading metrics along the way is a lot of what we'll do. Or I have had quite a few times where we just have to demonstrate what is the volume or the potential. So we start doing some of that forecasting. And usually I'm able to get some of the more technical numbers-driven people on board at that point. But a lot of times it's just like marketing. We're testing things. We're seeing what jives with our audience, what doesn't. So sometimes you're not going to get that data until you actually try something. But usually by that point, we at least have enough investment. Like I'm going to say, if you've got a list of 2,000, let's whittle it down to 4. And I'm going to use the data sets that we have available to do that.
So, but if you drive that, you get that interest, do you kind of turn it over to, whoever at the company that you're helping with to say, hey, look, we've done our job. We got your interest. Now you got to finish the sale.
For parts of it, I mean, we are still a digital marketing agency. So there's a lot of times where we can help execute that. But yeah, if we're saying, hey, well, here's 2,000 different directions you could have gone on the roadmap. Here's the 4 we recommend. Yeah. After that, I give it to the product team and engineering, and it's their job to figure out, is the juice worth the squeeze and the investment? What are some of the other stakeholders or parameters that they need to work within? But at least we've been able to quantify for them, here's where interest is, here's where the potential from a market perspective. How you get there though, I'm not going to try to tell you how to engineer it because that would be just asinine.
Does it come down to finding the right keywords and then buying that sponsorship on like Google?
Honestly, a lot of things of what we're seeing, especially because, and I'm sure we'll talk about AI in a little bit, but Google is kind of struggling right now. So marketing on Google is not the same cash cow that it was even 2 years ago, right? It's still highly effective, still one of your highest return channels. Really where we're talking about is creating new channels of revenue. So yes, I still want my typical marketing activities to go on, but looking at this, is there a different place that I should be marketing as opposed to I should only be on Google Ads or I need to move over to Bing? It's more about finding those unique perspectives of where to grow and scale.
Say more on where Google is struggling today, if you don't mind, because being outside in, I don't see this from a marketing perspective. I just know it's Google. It seems like it's doing okay to me.
Yeah. So one of the things we're seeing, obviously ChatGPT came out in November last year. So we're seeing just the growth of AI tools is very accelerated. But even before that, we already had tools available to us as marketers for helping to create content that's drafted by AI and just using a large language model. So what that has done is you have a lot of sites that have just used those to spin up thousands upon thousands of pages of really just regurgitated content. So they're not adding any new value, no unique aspects or perspectives. Now, what that's done is really just in the last couple of years, the size of the internet has grown exponentially. And crawling all of that, indexing it, understanding it, that all takes resources from Google. So for us as SEOs, the game has changed in the last few years, where we used to just, if you post it, it'll be indexed. We've definitely been having a lot more conversations of how do you make sure that your content actually gets picked up by Google, because the resources are not infinite. They kind of are, but at the same time, they're not. So, how do you make sure that what you're putting out there is actually worthy of the crawling resources? How do you make sure that, if you're IBM and you have a 10 million page website, that it's crawling the half a million pages that you actually care about and generate revenue? So that's part of the equation. But then you also now have all of these things are being produced by AI, but AI hallucinates. AI makes things up. And so because of that, we're seeing bad information be posted, or there's no reasoning behind what's been published. So now Google's also, in addition to crawling and indexing, they're trying to understand, is this accurate? Did this come from an expert, or was it spun up by a bot? And so that's really difficult and time consuming. And frankly, the AI tools are getting better at sounding more human, which also means Google's having a harder time to figure out what's accurate, what's expertise versus somebody just using an AI tool.
So let me restate that back to you in short order. It's still priority in what will be indexed, but it's just so vast that sometimes it feels like there's areas that not even be an index, hence it won't be prioritized. And to make matters worse, it's a matter of figuring out what's human and what's a bot, which means if it's a bot, it could be just BS information.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. Like, how do you make sure, because for Google, their goal is to get users to the answers that they're looking for. Ideally, you, as a user, you click on the ad, so they generate revenue, because that's still 80% of their revenue comes from Google ads. That's for the entire Alphabet company. So they're still trying to give users that premium experience of getting the right answers. But unfortunately, what we're seeing is there's a lot of bad answers that are being shown preference because Google can't tell.
Do they not know what's an ad and what's not anymore, or what?
So I'm talking about just the organic side. For ads, yes, you'll still know that, and they've been increasing the ad inventory, and by that I mean how many ads show on the SERP itself, or search engine results page. So yeah, the ads are kind of a different piece. It's more about the organic results themselves. So the ones where we technically earn the listing, we don't pay for it.
Usually in Google, I'll be honest, what I do is I just don't like to be told what to do. So I guess I skip the ads. I go down to the organic piece, like you say, and I start there, which is kind of ironic.
And most people do.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, because but I will have to say, though, I don't do that as much on Amazon. You know what I mean? When I'm on Amazon, for some reason, if they give me an Amazon recommends, I don't know why, but it's like, well, they must have done the research as to what quality is better, etc. I know. And for some reason, I tend to slant in that direction. You're probably going to tell me I shouldn't. It's the same thing as Google. Paid by their sponsors.
So actually, I'm with you. I trust Amazon's recommends a little bit more. Now, that's just because I know that to get that badge, Amazon is using machine learning to understand the sentiment and look at the ratings and reviews from your products. So you only get that if you also have a positive reputation as a seller already. Now, it's still a little bit of a pay to play, but I mean, honestly, my 7-year-old could get on Google Ads, and he has a debit card, so he could start an ad campaign on Google Ads. Now, obviously, there's probably some legal ramifications behind that, but like, he's got a credit card, he can do it. By the way, I control that very strictly, so I'm not just like,
Seems like you know what you're talking about there. I'll trust you.
But with that, yeah, just anybody can get on Google Ads. Now, they do, there are protected industries, thank goodness. So like, if you're running anything having to do with medical or financial, we call those your money or your life industries. It's much stricter guidelines, but you don't really have to earn your positioning on Google Ads. You can straight up pay for it. Now, if you're Adidas and you're bidding on Nike keywords, you're going to pay more than Nike would, because technically it's not you, and you have to pay, Nike should earn that spot, whereas Adidas has to pay more for it. But like, if you got the budget, you can do it. So all of that to say, I'm with you on Amazon. I trust a little bit more because I know the process to get that. And anybody can advertise on Google Ads. And to also just give you a demonstration of that, like Google Ads, a typical good click-through rate, so where your ad shows up and someone actually clicks it, is 2%. Whereas a number one spot organically is anywhere from 25 to 30%.
So, hey, you've only talked about really the negative on generative AI. What about the positive?
So I do think there are some cases where it can speed up our processes, also give new ideas. So it's definitely, it can be a really useful tool. I think people need to understand the limitations of it, though, that it regurgitates. It doesn't really create anything new, right? Even your image generators, they're combining already existing art. And then there's a few, just the legal implications. You cannot protect any content that you created with generative AI. The EU and the US Copyright Office have already come out and said that those things cannot be protected. So if it's important enough for you to want to trademark, you're going to need to hire someone to creatively come up with the content themselves.
It's going to get hairy, right? We'll do it ourselves and make it similar to that image. But then you're
Oh,
really using the generative AI piece, right? Because you've already set the
yeah.
standard.
No, I'm not envious of the lawyers who are going to have to figure that out. Because yes, that's something you could definitely do. Like, I know creative directors and graphic designers who use that. And what they do is they just go through and make sure it's pixel perfect. And now you've got something where they'll take some creative licenses and move things around. Because also, I don't know if you've seen the photos. Sometimes AI has a hard time with hands, which kind of makes sense because most artists have a hard time with hands. Hands are hard. So,
well, I think for me, the whole body is pretty difficult. Face, hands, shoulders, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. But yeah, to your point, it is going to get really interesting. And then also, typically in the past with any kind of copyright law, also we're getting into, can you tell I minored in intellectual property in college? You're getting into, usually it's the responsibility of someone who's trying to sue for copyright infringement. It's on that party to identify and prove that your original content was stolen. Mm-hmm. That's going to be so difficult these days.
Yeah, I don't know how you're going to do it.
Yeah, because also, I mean, even the AI tools, there are some coming out that will show you the references and the citations of where they pulled this information. But most of them that I've seen still don't give you the citations. We talk about ChatGPT, and what OpenAI tells us is that it was trained on the internet. What does that mean? There's a lot on the internet. There's a lot on the internet that I wouldn't want associated with my brand, right? So it's just, how do you know where things are coming from? That's not crystal clear right now. And yeah, it's really interesting, and we're gonna see how case precedent gets established, because there's a defamation case right now. So is it OpenAI's fault or for what ChatGPT produces? It's tough to say.
Yes, for the folks listening, I mean, they probably know my point of view here, having been from IBM. Yeah, we're trying to stay clean away from that. We're trying to, look, we will do the AI, generative AI, based on your data. Actually, we'll do it wherever you want it. But if you get into the area of scraping the internet, I mean, it is what it is. You're going to get everything from hallucinations to otherwise. Therefore, I would rather have a foundational model that's targeted, domain-based, using a client's data. That's where we win. But this is going to be interesting in terms of the overall scraping of the internet. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I am 100% with you, because for me, it's about, I don't know what bias is in it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And, as something that I've felt very strongly, as a marketer, we represent the voices of our brands. And so not knowing what bias I'm bringing into, that really bothers me, because I feel like we have a responsibility to try to remove that as much as possible for our companies.
Amen.
I have no idea what bias is in there. It's terrible.
Question is, what do you do on the marketing side of it? I told you kind of our philosophy, but look, it's not easy. If you're going to scrape unknown data sources, you're going to have bias one way or another. You got to be able to detect bias. Absolutely. What we do is we have tools that can work to detect bias and look at things like drift, etc. And you can use that on any source of data. Boy, it gets much harder though when it's like, again, a scrape of the internet. And by the way, the one thing that scares me on this, when you do this scrape of the internet, it's almost like a reflection of ourselves as a society sometimes. And I don't know, it's like, I don't like what I see coming back. You know what I mean?
Not always kind. No.
Yes. No, it's not kind at all. And then I'm thinking, hopefully that's not really a reflection of us. I'd hate to think that. Anyway.
So first thing I want to say as a marketer, I love people, I love a person is smart. People are stupid. That's like one of the top things we learn, which is just really unfortunate. Maybe not the best viewpoint. But so it's exactly what you're talking about. So if in cases where my team is using generative AI, so if we're using ChatGPT, Perspective, all of those that are out there, then we do make sure that there's time in our process to manually and make sure a human has edited and curated and fact checked. So it's almost like, as marketers, we're having to adopt a little bit of like paralegal skills to make sure that things are right, or journalistic skills, which actually a lot of digital marketers started as journalists. So those tend to go pretty well hand in hand. Now, when I'm doing my research and the consumer insights that we do, so I'm doing it on a much smaller scale, obviously, than IBM can do. But I use my own machine learning models. So I feed it the data so that I can kind of say, all right, I see where the biases are. We do try to use, like you say, the bias identification software to help us really figure out what it is. The biggest thing for me is definitely, so I'll do analysis in English and Spanish, and just the amount of bias that happens in just how words are used and how language is used. Like the genders of nouns in Spanish is really interesting in how that impacts bias. Also, I could probably talk about that for hours, so you'll probably have to stop me. But because I find it absolutely fascinating. But more to the point, I'm just trying to at least identify where the bias is so I can either try to combat it, shift things a little bit, or even just put it in the list of assumptions. We're like, hey, I need you to know, like, here's what it is. When we're talking about if you're an English speaker versus Japanese speaker, Japanese use a lot less identifiers and give people like ownership of their traits. Whereas in English, we would say, like, for example, in English, you say you're beautiful. So you're giving them an identifier of the person now is like, that's how they identify themselves as beautiful. Whereas in Japanese, it really translates to more like you have beauty. So it's something you have, but not necessarily something that defines you. So it's some interesting nuances there. So there'll be
So
times
how does
where
that play in marketing though?
It definitely plays into how people view certain objects, sometimes how the language needs to be crafted so you connect to them. Because marketing is still really about storytelling. And really what we're trying to do with DCI is find the data to support the story or figure out how the story should be told. Because marketing is all about storytelling. We're trying to connect with thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people without ever actually meeting them. So that's getting into all language crafting. But yes, with bias, it's trying to identify the assumptions so that you can at least try to account for those as much as possible. But yeah, crafting how you communicate is super important, especially as you jump from market to market and language to language.